Darkness still hung over the desert when the metallic sound of Egyptian chariots began to echo on the horizon. Thousands of Hebrews, recently freed from slavery, found themselves trapped between the vastness of the Red Sea and the most feared army of the time. Fear was palpable. Cries, prayers, and anxious glances turned to a single man, Moses. At that instant, history approached a point of no return. The sea ahead was immense. Its agitated waters reflected the reddish dawn sky. The people cried out, "Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die here in the desert?" But Moses, serene, raised his staff. He had no weapons, no soldiers. He had faith. And then the extraordinary happened. A strong wind began to blow, first as a breeze, then as a directed storm. The waters began to recede, forming liquid walls to the right and left. A dry path emerged between them, defying all known laws of nature. Crossing the now exposed seabed was like walking between two impossible walls. The people passed in silence, each step an act of courage, of faith, and of awe. It was more than a miracle. It was an eternal cry etched in time. God was with them. When the last Hebrew reached the other side, the Egyptians advanced. But the waters, once submissive to God's command, returned with fury. The sea swallowed the enemy in a single movement, sealing the deliverance with power and justice. For millennia, this scene has inspired believers and scholars, theologians and atheists, filmmakers and archaeologists. How to explain something so out of the ordinary? Was it a supernatural event suspended from the laws of physics by pure divine intervention? Or was there, hidden between the lines of time, an unknown natural phenomenon that could give meaning to the miracle without erasing it? The doubt resurfaces in every generation. Was it God who opened the sea, or did nature itself act according to the divine plan? This question, instead of weakening faith, seems to strengthen it, because if there was a miracle, it was recorded. And if science can one day understand the how, perhaps it will not deny the miracle. It will merely reveal its depth. The parting of the Red Sea remains one of the greatest enigmas of the Bible, and perhaps of humanity itself. While many accept the narrative as literal and sacred, others seek clues in the desert winds, seasonal tides, and forgotten geographical maps. Every discovery, every theory, adds a layer to the mystery. And the closer we get to possible explanations, the more fascinating becomes the idea of a God who does not break natural laws. He masters them, uses them, bends them for his purposes. What if the heavens hadn't opened by pure magic? What if, behind that spectacle narrated in Exodus, there were natural forces acting in millimeter-perfect harmony with time and space? Would this diminish the greatness of the miracle, or acknowledge that the Creator governs even the winds with surgical precision? Decades of research suggest that the answer may not be as simple as yes or no. In 2010, scientists from the University of Colorado and the National Center for Atmospheric Research published a surprising study. Using computer simulations based on meteorological and topographical data, they showed that a strong east wind, blowing at 100 kilometers per hour throughout the night, could indeed temporarily expose the bed of a shallow body of water, creating a dry path for a few hours, enough time for a hasty crossing. This phenomenon is called wind set down, a hydrodynamic effect where wind intensely displaces water, forming a liquid wall on one side and drastically reducing the water level on the other. Under specific conditions, the visual result could incredibly resemble what the Bible describes: divided waters, dry ground, and a temporary corridor between two bodies of water. These simulations were applied, for example, to the region where the Red Sea meets shallow lakes and swamps in the Nile Delta. Many researchers suggest that the crossing might not have happened in the Red Sea as we know it today, but perhaps in the Sea of Reeds, an ancient Hebrew designation for marshy regions, which, in the Greek translation, ended up being misinterpreted as red. If the Hebrews crossed there at a specific and shallow point, science argues that the wind could, indeed, have made the impossible happen for a few precious minutes. But here is the question that remains. What is the chance of such a rare climatic event occurring exactly when thousands of people were about to be exterminated? Statistics would defy any human wager. Moreover, what if this natural phenomenon had occurred a day earlier or later? Or if the wind had blown in the opposite direction? The Hebrew people would have been massacred. Therefore, even in the face of scientific possibility, there remains an element that calculations cannot explain: the perfect timing. It is at this point that science and faith meet again. The first offers a possible explanation of how something like this could have happened. The second supports the reason why it happened. They are not mutually exclusive. They complement each other. Because, even if nature acted, it did so under such precise orchestration that it can hardly be attributed to chance. Critics might argue that trying to explain miracles is to reduce their essence. But proponents of this integration between science and faith respond with another question. Wouldn't God be even grander for using the laws of creation that He Himself wrote to accomplish His purposes? The miracle of the parting of the sea, then, perhaps lies not only in the movement of the waters, but in God's absolute dominion over time, wind, and the invisible paths of creation. An intelligence that knows exactly where, when, and how everything should occur. And that, for many, is even more powerful than any breaking of natural laws. Thus, the impossible becomes possible, not because it defies logic, but because it reveals a divine logic even deeper than we can comprehend. A sea that opens, yes, but perhaps also minds that open to see that the miracle is not in contradicting science, but in being above it. The sea holds secrets. In the silent depths of its abysses lie fragments of ancient stories, forgotten shipwrecks, and perhaps clues to events that marked humanity forever. If Moses truly crossed the Red Sea, and if the Egyptian army was swallowed by the waters soon after, where are the traces? This is the question that has intrigued archaeologists, scholars, and curious minds for decades. Among the various expeditions carried out in search of tangible evidence of the crossing, one name gained prominence: Ron Wyatt, an amateur archaeologist and Christian explorer who, in the 1980s, claimed to have found structures resembling chariot wheels, submerged in the Gulf of Aqaba between Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula. According to Wyatt, images captured by divers showed circular shapes covered in coral, suggesting wheels with axles and even fragments of petrified skeletons. The news spread like wildfire among religious circles. Could this be the definitive proof? Were the submerged Egyptian wheels an indication that Pharaoh's army had indeed been swallowed by the sea? However, the scientific community remained skeptical. Experts pointed out the absence of controlled excavations, the lack of dating of the materials, and the methodological imprecision of the discoveries. To this day, no validated scientific publication has officially confirmed that the objects found are, in fact, Egyptian artifacts from the Exodus period. But the fascination persists. Other researchers turned their attention to ancient records. Egyptian manuscripts speak of climatic catastrophes, plagues, and social collapses. One of the most enigmatic texts is the Ipuwer Papyrus, which describes the Nile turning to blood, the death of the firstborn, and the flight of slaves. Although controversial, the manuscript presents unsettling parallels with the biblical narrative and raises the possibility that there are historical truths hidden between the lines of myths. Furthermore, geological studies show that the seabed of the Gulf of Suez and Aqaba has rock formations and reefs that could, in theory, allow crossings under specific conditions, with extreme low tide or under the effect of intense winds. It is at this point that faith and science once again confront or complement each other. Because if the physical scenario exists, and if there are archaeological indications, however inconclusive. Does this make the narrative more plausible or more symbolic? Even among skeptics, there is a silent admiration for this possibility. After all, archaeology itself is full of discoveries that were once considered legends, like the city of Troy, once seen as a myth and later revealed by Heinrich Schliemann's excavations in the 19th century. Who would dare claim with certainty that biblical records are merely metaphors, when history has so often proven otherwise? The absence of definitive proof is not proof of absence. The vastness of the sea, the corrosion of time, sediments, and tectonic activity may have hidden or destroyed any physical traces. Still, the search continues not only in the waters of the Middle East, but in the hearts of millions who believe that the truth is there, waiting to be discovered. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not submerged in the salty depths of the sea, but rather in the enigma that dwells in the encounter between history and faith. Because if the ruins of a miracle are ever found, this will not eliminate the supernatural. On the contrary, it could be the echo of an ancient voice saying, "You have now seen that I am the Lord." Time is an invisible line where the events of humanity are woven together. For modern man, it is controlled by clocks and calendars. For the ancients, it was regulated by sunrise and sunset, by the seasons, by signs in the heavens. But, for God, according to the scriptures, time is something else, a dimension under his control. And what if natural phenomena occurred precisely when he desired? Wouldn't that, by definition, be a miracle? The Bible says that Moses stretched out his staff and the sea parted throughout the night by a strong east wind, a detail often ignored, but essential. Atmospheric scientists who have studied the event suggest that a wind of 100 kilometers per hour, constant for hours, could indeed push water to the sides in shallow areas, an effect known as wind set-down. And this phenomenon is not fiction. It has already been recorded in regions like Lake Erie, in the United States, where the wind displaced masses of water for kilometers. In 2010, a computer simulation led by Carl Drews of the National Center for Atmospheric Research indicated that a crossing could have occurred at a specific location in the Nile Delta, where strong winds and suitable submerged topography would have created a temporary land bridge. According to the model, the dry corridor would remain for about 4 hours before the waters violently returned to their place. Science describes the how, but the when is what is intriguing. Why exactly that night? Why precisely at the moment the Hebrews were cornered? This synchronicity is what escapes pure logic. The exact moment a rare and predictable phenomenon occurs to save a people is, for many, the touch of the invisible on tangible reality. Theologians see in this a recurring pattern. God uses creation as an instrument. He does not need to break the laws of physics, because he created them. Just as Jesus turned water into wine without alchemical formulas, as Elijah prayed and fire fell from heaven, perhaps the Red Sea responded to the Creator's command through the natural gears of the universe. It is here that science and faith meet not as rivals, but as companions in search of truth. Science can explain the mechanisms. Faith understands the purposes. And when both walk together, they reveal that the miracle does not need to deny logic, only to transcend chance. The most intriguing thing, however, is that this divine timing rarely repeats itself. The same winds may blow again. The seas may recede with equal intensity, but the moment will not be the same, because the miracle is not just in the occurrence, but in the perfect necessity of that instant. The sea did not open just because of the wind. It opened because the people needed to cross and because God willed it to be so. God's time does not obey human chronology. It manifests when all seems lost, when probabilities run out, when reason gives way to trust. And it is at that exact moment that the impossible finds passage. Whether the wind blew for hours or for centuries is just a detail. What matters is that, at the right time, the path opened and the Hebrews passed as if on dry land.
When Moses led the people across the dry bed of the Red Sea, something much greater than a crossing happened. That scene did not just mark the liberation of a nation, shaped the identity of a people, and echoed in countless cultures, religions, and resistance movements around the world. What many do not realize is that the impact of this event goes beyond the pages of the Bible. It is etched in the collective unconscious of humanity, as a universal symbol of overcoming the impossible. Modern science cannot measure faith, but it can measure impact. Historians, anthropologists, and social psychologists agree certain events, whether historical or mythological, generate lasting effects for generations. The crossing of the Red Sea is one of them. The story of an oppressed people who overcome a powerful empire, cross a sea with God's help, and begin a new journey towards freedom is an archetype present in various cultures, from Africa to Asia, from the Middle East to the Americas. In Carl Jung's psychology, this fits the idea of primordial archetypes, universal patterns of behavior and narrative present in all civilizations. The Red Sea represents the barrier between slavery and freedom, between fear and faith, between limited man and divine intervention. It is the moment when humanity faces chaos, the turbulent waters, and, through trust in something greater, finds a path. Curiously, even indigenous peoples who never had direct contact with Judeo-Christian traditions tell similar stories of seas parting, natural bridges appearing at the right moment, or rivers drying up to allow escape. Are these coincidences, or traces of a common ancestral memory that transcends time and geography? From a scientific point of view, the impact of the Exodus narrative is also measurable in other areas: literature, music, politics, and even cultural genetics. Studies of Jewish identity show that the memory of the Exodus is one of the central pillars in the construction of faith and cohesion. Among communities scattered throughout the world, from antiquity to today, you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt is not just memory. It is instruction. It is culture. It is spiritual DNA.
In the 20th century, leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. evoked the Red Sea in historic speeches, comparing the civil rights struggle to the crossing of the Hebrew people. "I've been to the mountaintop, and I've seen the promised land," he declared, clearly referring to Moses. This type of parallelism reinforces how the biblical crossing still inspires contemporary battles for justice, equality, and faith. But there is something even more fascinating. Some geneticists and biblical archaeologists have begun to study whether there are genetic markers left by the movement of the Hebrews after the Exodus. Certain tribes in southern Africa, such as the Lemba, claim descent from the ancient Israelites. DNA studies show genetic traits close to Jewish priestly lineages, suggesting that the Exodus saga may have left traces not only in the desert sand, but in the human body itself. This phenomenon reinforces the idea that miracles do not need to end the moment they occur. They reverberate. The Red Sea may have closed in a matter of minutes, but its effect has opened paths for millennia. The event may have occurred under an exact combination of wind, geography, and divine timing, but its impact transcends nature. It touches what is deepest in the human being, the need to believe that, even in the face of an ocean of impossibilities, there is a route that only God can reveal. When the people crossed the sea, the miracle was seen with the eyes, but the true miracle perhaps happened within them and within us. The certainty that nothing is as powerful as hope, moved by faith. Science can explain the winds. It can model graphs, predict phenomena, and analyze archaeological data. But it cannot quantify what happens in the heart of those who believe. And, in every generation, new Red Seas arise. Problems, oppressions, doubts. And yet, generation after generation, millions continue to believe that, at the right time, the sea will open. Centuries have passed since Moses raised his staff and the Red Sea parted, allowing a fleeing people to cross a miraculous path. The question that echoes to this day is, can this miracle happen again? Or rather, does the sea still part, not necessarily in water, but in our lives, in the crises we face? Nature continues to follow its cycles and laws, But modern science reminds us that rare phenomena can repeat themselves, albeit with low frequency. Extreme winds, unusual tides, rapid climate changes, all of this remains a real possibility. And what if, at the moment humanity most needs it, the perfect combination of natural conditions occurs again? The idea that God acts through creation is not exclusive to the past. But beyond physics and meteorology, there is an inner sea, the sea of human anguish, doubts, and fears. For everyone who seeks a crossing, be it personal, emotional, or spiritual, the Red Sea represents the seemingly impossible obstacle. Doubt, depression, loneliness, fear of the future. And as in the biblical narrative, it is at this moment that the miracle can happen. Not necessarily with a strong wind that pushes waters, but with an invisible force that opens paths within us: faith, hope, resilience. These are the winds that push away the waters of despair, that leave firm ground beneath our feet, even when everything seems submerged. Science today investigates the connections between mind and body, the power of faith and meditation on health, the impact of positive thinking and emotional support networks. These are modern bridges that recall the ancient crossing, showing that miracles can occur in various dimensions of human existence. Thus, the question is not whether the physical Red Sea will open again, but whether we are prepared to recognize and cross the Red Seas of our own lives, whether through science, faith, or a combination of the two. The crossing repeats when we choose to trust that the impossible can be possible. Therefore, the story of Moses and the Red Sea is not just a reminder of the past. It is an eternal invitation to look at the horizon, face the unknown, and move forward, even when the waters seem to block the path. Perhaps, in the silence of the night, a wind will blow again, invisible to the eyes, but strong enough to open the sea, be it literal or figurative. And when that happens, we will be ready to cross. The miracle, after all, has never ceased to happen. It dwells at the intersection between science and the divine, the natural and the supernatural, the visible and the invisible. Like the sea that opened thousands of years ago, it remains silent and powerful, awaiting the right moment. The parting of the Red Sea remains a mystery where science and faith intertwine. Whether by divine power or natural phenomena, this event invites us to believe in the impossible. The miracle does not deny logic, it merely transcends it, showing that, at the right time, paths open in nature and in our lives. The sea still parts for those with the courage to cross.